You send a message. No reply for 3 days. Then they text back like nothing happened. And instead of saying something, you just respond. Normal. Calm. Like it didn't bother you at all. Or someone asks why you didn't come to the party. And you almost start explaining, work was crazy, I wasn't feeling great, it's complicated, and then you stop. Mid-sentence. And you just say, I couldn't make it. Full stop. No footnotes. No apology tour. And people don't know what to do with that. Because you used to explain everything. Every decision. Every boundary. Every reason you needed space, said no, chose yourself. You used to hand people a full legal brief just to justify existing the way you do. And at some point, quietly, without announcing it, you stopped. And now they call you cold, distant, difficult. Like not over-explaining yourself is a character flaw. Like the absence of a paragraph means something is wrong with you. Nothing is wrong with you. What psychologists discovered about people who stop explaining themselves has nothing to do with arrogance or indifference. It has everything to do with something much more precise. Something that happened inside you slowly, then all at once. Stay with me, because this video was made for you. Here's the thing most people don't understand. Explaining yourself constantly isn't communication. It's a trauma response. Psychologist Pete Walker, who spent decades studying childhood emotional neglect, identified something called the fawn response. It's a survival pattern where you learn to manage other people's emotions before your own. You explain, you justify, you overclarify, not because the other person deserves it, but because some part of you learned early that if you didn't, things got dangerous. Silence got punished. Boundaries got crossed. And love felt like something you had to earn with words. So you became fluent in justification. You wrote essays inside your own head before sending a 2-sentence text. You rehearsed explanations in the shower. You pre-apologized for things that hadn't even happened yet. That's not communication. That's a kid trying to keep the peace in a house where peace was never guaranteed. And then something shifted. Carl Rogers at the University of Chicago spent years studying what he called the internal locus of evaluation, the point at which a person stops measuring their worth by external approval and starts trusting their own perception of reality. Rogers found that psychologically healthy individuals don't need to justify their choices to everyone who asks. They've developed an inner authority. A quiet knowing that their reasons are valid even when no one else can see them. When you stopped explaining yourself, you didn't become cold. You became the person Rogers was describing. You moved the needle from their verdict to your own. That's not detachment. That's maturity. But it doesn't look the same for everyone. Because there are different versions of this. And you might be in more than one. The first group stopped explaining because they finally got tired. Not dramatically tired. Not I'm done with everyone tired. Just the quiet, bone-deep exhaustion of realizing that explanations didn't actually help. You explained yourself beautifully, honestly, vulnerably, and it didn't change anything. They still misread you. They still made it about them. They still held it against you. At some point your brain did the math. You were spending enormous energy producing 0 results. And you stopped. Not out of coldness. Out of efficiency. Jennifer Campbell at the University of British Columbia studied what she called self-concept clarity. How clearly and confidently a person understands who they are. Her research found that people with high self-concept clarity are significantly less dependent on external validation to feel stable. In other words, once you know who you are, you stop needing everyone else to agree with you. You stopped explaining because you finally believed yourself. You didn't need a jury. You became your own verdict. The second group stopped explaining because they grew up having to explain everything. And I mean everything. Picture this. You're 9 years old. You come home from school in a bad mood. Not for any dramatic reason. Just tired. Just a kid having a kid day. And someone in your house wants to know why. Not in a warm, "How was your day" kind of way. In a "what did I do wrong? Are you mad at me? You're always so difficult" kind of way. So you explain. And then you explain the explanation. And then you apologize for the mood that was never even directed at them. You learned early that your internal states were other people's business. That your feelings needed to be packaged, translated, and made safe for others to receive. That simply being a person was somehow something you owed an account of. And you carried that into adulthood, until the weight of it became unbearable. Stephen Porges at the University of North Carolina developed the polyvagal theory, which maps how the nervous system responds to safety and threat. What Porges found is that people who grew up in environments where their emotions were routinely questioned or dismissed develop a hypervigilant social nervous system. They scan constantly for disapproval. They preemptively explain to avoid conflict. Over-explanation isn't weakness. It's a nervous system that learned to stay one step ahead of rejection. When you stopped explaining, your nervous system wasn't shutting down. It was finally resting. That's not withdrawal. That's recovery. The third group stopped explaining for a different reason entirely. They became so self-aware, so genuinely grounded, that explanation started to feel like translation. Like trying to describe color to someone who insists they can't see it. Not because you're better than anyone, but because you know yourself well enough now to recognize when a conversation is going in circles. When the other person doesn't actually want to understand. They want to debate. They want to be right. They want you to shrink back into the version of yourself they're more comfortable with. Emma Sapala at Stanford University studied what she called emotional self-sufficiency, the capacity to regulate your own emotional world without depending on others to validate it. Her research found that emotionally self-sufficient people don't stop engaging. They just stop engaging pointlessly. They have a finely tuned sense of when a conversation has potential and when it's already decided. And they choose not to audition for a verdict that's been written before they walked in. Stopping explaining for this group isn't silence. It's discernment. That's not arrogance. That's wisdom wearing a quiet face. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. And I'm going to need you to stay honest with yourself for this part. Because there is a version of not explaining yourself that is growth. And there is a version that is avoidance. One is the person who has done the work, knows their values, and no longer needs external permission to trust themselves. The other is the person who stopped explaining because explanation once led to rejection and their nervous system quietly decided it would never risk that again. Not because they've healed, because they've armored. Is your silence a boundary or a bunker? Are you protecting your energy or are you hiding so completely that even the people who deserve access can't find you anymore? Both feel exactly the same from the inside. That's what makes this hard. If you're not sure, ask yourself this. When someone genuinely loves you, someone safe, someone who has earned your trust, do you still go quiet? Do you still hold back? Does the explanation still stick in your throat even when the room is safe? If yes, that's worth sitting with. That's not a flaw. That's information. Because the goal was never to stop explaining to everyone. The goal was to stop explaining yourself to people who were never going to listen. There's a difference, and only you know which one you're actually doing. Be honest with yourself, because the answer matters more than anyone's opinion of you. Here's what I know for certain. The moment you stopped writing essays to justify your existence, something in you exhaled. And the people who truly know you, the ones who've watched you carry the weight of everyone else's comfort for years, they weren't surprised. They were relieved for you. Because here's what the research actually says. A 75-year study from Harvard, the longest-running study on adult happiness and development ever conducted, found that the quality of a person's relationships matters infinitely more than the quantity. Not how many people you explain yourself to, how deeply you allow yourself to be known by the few who are worth it. You didn't become closed. You became selective. And selective isn't a synonym for broken. So if any of this feels familiar, if you've ever felt the relief of a sentence left unfinished, if you've ever sent a reply that had no apology in it and felt, for just a second, like yourself, this is your permission slip. You are not cold. You are not icing people out. You are not difficult or withdrawn or too proud to communicate. You are someone who finally learned that a closed mouth is not the same as a closed heart. You are someone who realized that your reasons belong to you. You are someone who spent years handing out pieces of yourself that were never asked for with kindness, only demanded with pressure. And you finally put them down. You are not explained. You are whole. Drop a comment below. When was the moment you stopped over-explaining? It doesn't have to be long. Even one word. I read every single one. And the person scrolling past your comment needed to read it just as much as you needed to write it. If this video found you at the right time, subscribe. I make videos like this every week for people who are done shrinking. And if you've ever felt like you process the world differently from everyone around you, like your emotions run deeper, like you feel things before you can name them, the next video is going to explain exactly why. That one is next. You are not too much. You were just explaining yourself to people who never deserved the full story.